Hello everyone and welcome to the April TELedvisors webinar for 2021. So over to Sarah, if you want to share your slides, the floor is yours. Or I can.
Yeah, that'd be cool. I just thought I'd say hi briefly and just, yes, hearing Frances's voice and seeing that project. I think that project kept a lot of us sane through, what became an increasingly loopy year, and it was, we were all quite devastated actually, having worked, done all of this planning work for the squares, not to be able to meet at OER 20. And I remember, understanding why. Of course, it was cancelled as the whole situation with COVID worsened and deepened. But of all the things that were lost with the way the conference had to quickly go online, it was the lack of being able to see that quilt together that really that I really grieved for actually. It just felt like a manifestation of a lot of EdTechers' commitment to the community actually, and men, not only women but men and people who had never crafted had a crack at it. And there were some really interesting tips for how to do craft if you never did any fabric, and you can print it out on a digital printer, or you can iron on this and the other thing. So there was lots of entry-level crafting opportunities because people felt that they wanted to participate in something that represented justice and care in the education space, which is a concern for many of us in the open ed arena. So yes,
that's true. It was very tangible thing in sort of weird times. Over to you.
Thank you. So I guess this is an opportunity to reflect on some of the things I'm thinking and doing and others are doing to continue advancing notions of justice and care in education. And I think, yeah, that's sort of what I'm on about today. So, and I first of all just want to acknowledge that I'm living and working on Dja Wurrung country, which is around the Castlemaine district in central Goldfields, Victoria. And due to Mum's knee operation, I did a quick dash and I'm now on Dharawal country in Wollongong. So yes, all very beautiful and long-term educators in their communities. So I want to start off with this as a sort of a framing of feminist pedagogy and being super helpful and useful for the times we're in, and also nourishing on an individual level. And so this is from the work of Sarah Ahmed, who I only recently discovered like 12 months ago, and I've been bit by bit reading more of her work and finding it super helpful to explain some of my own work experiences and tensions about being someone who thinks differently in an organisation, and how that can lead you to have a lot of outsider type of experiences, as well as in other spaces feeling very much part of the culture, insider and outsider at both, which has sort of been quite core, I think, to my career as a whole. So she says that living a feminist life, and that's something that's applicable for both men and women, it doesn't mean adopting a set of ideals or norms of conduct, although it might mean asking ethical questions about how to live better in an unjust and an unequal world, and how to create relationships with others that are more equal. And I'm thinking about that very much in terms of collegiality, solidarity, and also allyship with our students. And it also might be about, asking ethical questions about how to find ways to support those who are not supported or are less supported by social systems. And so this is we've had a really confronting moment in history. And so this is a tweet from the 21st of April, and I'm thinking and reflecting on feminist pedagogy in the now. So this is from Amy Nussbaum in the States, who's a fellow OER and author. She said, "Yeah, I'm cancelling classes this week. Whichever way this goes, my black and brown students need a chance to breathe." So that's a pretty full-on statement in a pretty full-on week, and she is, of course, talking about waiting with bated breath for the Derek Chauvin trial announcement, which happened soon after. And there was quite a lot of educator engagement with this idea of who are we as educators and what's important to us in the educator community when, you know, life and death is you know, pretty brutal. And these sort of situations with Black Lives Matter in the States, and of course Black deaths in custody in Australia, is still hovering as a dreadful shadow. And so she went on to tell her students and to tell on Twitter educators if they want to take up this idea and even use her words to be free to do that. And she said, "As I wait with many of you to hear the verdict in the Derek Chauvin trial, I have a stark sense of needing to provide rest. And while I can't do much in your lives, I can give you 75 minutes back on Thursday. If you still need to earn some points to get up to the class points for the semester, your job is to send me an email with one thing you did or plan to do this week to bring you or your community peace or joy." And then she tells them to take care. And so this was not the only educator, and it was quite a fruitful conversation on Twitter about what was it important to do as an educator in this, you know, incredible time. And I think, you know, reflecting on this feminist stance for educators is super helpful. It acknowledges the inequality and the pain. It provides care for students, allyship for Black students and communities, time and space for grief and relief and reflection. And I think mostly it's just not sweeping it under the carpet and pressing on with pre-programmed curriculum like there is no problem. And then this led to some deeper reflections, again in the States primarily, but then moving outwards to a wider set of educators asking, you know, what can we do and what's our role? And this tweet really struck me, and it's pretty full on, but and confronting, I think, but the rich dialogue on Twitter really, I think, was super valuable for a lot of people grappling with this question. And Tom says, "I don't believe that, on the whole, teachers are less racist than cops, and I think we don't carry guns and that our damage is done quieter and over the space of years." And some of the comments that came in to support that very swiftly, I think, vindicated what was, you know, an awkward and difficult stance. But there was, I think this is just a useful reflection point again on the role of educators, and can we, you know, use feminist theory and critical theory to help us navigate a better place for our students and to not be part of a racist culture. You know, how do we go with that? And one of the threads that I read, and I found it really educational to read a lot of the comments of people's lived experiences of being Black kids in education systems. And I came across Cornelius Minor, who's an equitable literacy advocate in the States. And this, I just give this as a, if you're interested, if you find this, you know, something you're reflecting on. Just this first 9 minutes of this talk from the literacy conference is really powerful statement about, you know, this back in 2017, he's a teacher who was coming to school and wanting to know how on earth he could give a lesson when one of the students had been shot in the city that they lived in. And this was a girl who just simply asked a question of a police person, and he's reflecting on, you know, what is our job, you know, as educators to teach literacy if the student takes what we've teaches them to question and then, you know, dies. So again, you know, the role between, you know, education for change, you know, and what has to happen. And so he talks about we can't wait for the next generation to fix this, and he believes and advocates for educators taking an active role in addressing and acknowledging racism in the classroom and in society, and what you can do. And so if I think I just Googled anti-racist teaching resources, and I Googled anti-sexist teaching resources, which is something I've been monitoring for about the last 12 months. And I can just assure you that there's heaps of stuff. And so, yeah, I just encourage people to do that and see what is out there, and you can even possibly filter for particular disciplines. So even the Department of Education has quite a long list of resources that can be integrated and to raise awareness and educate about that. And in terms of higher ed, this is an example of the work of Equity Unbound. I've put the URL there, and this is, they talk about liberating structures and how you can create equitably hospitable spaces in your classrooms. So even if you're not teaching equity as a topic, how to make the classroom more hospitable for a variety of students. So there's a lesson plan type of activities there and online activities to do. Some really interesting work. And I just wanted to say here's a project that I've been involved with as a researcher, and this is another idea and positive example of what some educators are doing to address sexism and racism in the curriculum, and that's actually adjusting, rewriting, changing, curating their reading lists so that there is more recognition and representation for non-white scientists, business people, leaders, archaeologists, philosophers, whatever is there. So we are addressing this issue of why in some cases there is nobody like some of the students represented in the whole textbook. In the National Centre for Student Equity in Higher Ed research project that I'm just finishing up, it's a 12-month competitive grant scheme. We interviewed 19 students and 40-odd staff on the matter, and this is one of the quotes from the students. It's important to represent diverse people because you're not in a gated community of white straight people. So it's telling us straight there. And this student's talking about it as a moral issue. This isn't reality, and you have to represent everybody. And this student was had an identity that was never represented in textbooks, and that was an interesting conversation. This one, another student, barely women are mentioned. It's all about the men. Even the textbook for retail management, which is a female-dominated workforce, did not have women visible in it. And so there are obviously better examples, but there's clearly plenty of examples we found of textbooks being out of date and very unrepresentative of disciplines and students and communities. So something to think about there. This is the project website. We will be putting the report up there with recommendations. There'll be lots of examples of what people are doing to diversify their content, their reading lists and their curriculum. And yeah, the medical education, is definitely doing some work there. And it's, yes, there is definitely a thing about, there's a practical thing there about you can't diagnose skin conditions if the skin colour is not, representing the communities. But I think it's a bigger issue we found across a lot of disciplines, and so I'm proposing a modified definition of open textbooks. So a recent innovation in free digital text that can be distributed at no cost, printed at cost price, and modified for local needs, such as to correct gender, sociocultural and Indigenous underrepresentation and misrepresentation in the curriculum. And so this is just a hypothetical for you to think about moving forward. How diverse is your reading list for your students, and who do you cite in your research? It's worthwhile just doing an audit from time to time, and your librarians, I can assure you, will be really keen to assist and try and broaden and deepen the knowledges that are represented in material. And so I've given, I suppose, some examples of things that individual educators and support staff might be able to do to address sort of justice in the current times, but I think it's super important that institutions also act. And so I want to share this really amazing example from Plymouth college in the States, in the far northeast, and this is an institutional framework for digital learning that was developed through COVID, and they are also keeping and developing, because it's been so useful for them, as an ongoing framework for their online learning. So ACE stands for adaptability, connection and equity. And Robin DeRosa and her collaborators have also presented at OER 21 conference, and I've given you their presentation there. And this one really just frames equity and connection and adaptability, and I just find it really inspiring. And Robin is herself, you know, such a leader in this space, and another great person to follow on Twitter, the same as Mia, Maha and Catherine, who I had around that Equity Unbound example. In Australia, look, here's some institutional investment that's been considered from, you know, a social justice perspective around textbooks. And again, I'm aware of this because of my research project, but La Trobe invested in what they call the e-bureau at the library for supporting staff to publish open textbooks, which is textbooks that are free, no cost for students. They're openly licensed, and they have an ever-expanding catalogue there, and some of those also are really aware of the equity and diversity dimension in how they are written, and I think that is becoming more understood as something you can do with an open textbook at the same time that you're writing or modifying. USQ have also invested in Pressbooks, and the Open Textbook Library is an international consortia. And they've done some great titles on equity and diversity too. And also, I don't know if you know, but ANU Press, it's sort of a traditional press, I suppose, academic press, except for they've been doing open access for forever and a day, and they've now got 921 titles that are open access, including a series on Indigenous knowledges and topics, including this amazing language textbook for Gamilaroi, which is from northwestern New South Wales area. So, you know, there is some amazing diverse content, and I think it gives us inspiration for how we can, you know, embed those approaches as like feminist pedagogies, as well as teaching on the topics of inclusion and diversity and in different sorts of knowledges. And so I just wanted to stop now and just say, is there anyone else that's got any institutional examples of institutions doing like a framework that incorporates those sorts of equitable ideas beyond the digital accessibility, which I think for disability, which I think came in as a legal requirement and has become a bit of a box checking exercise. You know what I mean? What do you think? Kate has said, UOM, is that Uni of Melbourne? Oh my goodness, okay, fantastic. Yep, Deakin has a requirement for Global Learning Outcome 8, which is about cultural diversity with a sort of subsection on indigenising the curriculum. So yes, this term, decolonising the curriculum, that sounded a bit, you know, out there a couple of years ago, is starting to move into the centre of some of the institutional discourse, which is just amazing to see. Yeah, I'll have to keep an eye on that to see if they, you know, develop any guides about how you actually do that, or exemplars, for example. Has anyone else seen anything like that? Maybe there might be some more examples, but I'll move on. And so I guess I've just been reflecting on, again,
we're not right to wrap up fairly soon, Sarah?
Yeah, sure.
Another minute or so. Yeah.
Yep. This is, I'm just doing some reading to kind of stay with solidarity and resistance, and community building is also part of the sort of feminist practice that can transition over into pedagogies and just work practices. And so reading Sarah Ahmed's work, as I mentioned before, Eileen Morton Robinson's work on white women and feminism and thinking about allyship, and as a white woman not being part of the problem. And these are some authors that have been, I found, really nourishing to help navigate the white woman social justice space, and to embrace this more third wave or intersectional feminism that attends to race and gender through the writings of Black theorists, which are really powerful. So any of that can be really amazing. And just we tried to have a go at this in the Journal of Interactive Media and Education, where we did a special edition on open ed and social justice, and used social justice practices to gain some funding through Hewlett, so we could mentor and enhance the writing and editing process to support ECR and not the usual suspect authors, so we could have a diverser list of people doing things. And so this is the last thing. Yeah, part of what Sarah Ahmed talks about as useful feminist practice is refusal as something that is a powerful act in your life. Things that you won't do, you won't become, you won't accept for yourself and your identity and your practices. And you know, for example, in terms of JIME, theory, education, publishing, you know, we refuse to perpetuate the idea that theory is difficult and the domain of white male philosophers, and refuse to accept that spaces of academic publishing cannot be made more inclusive, and refuse academia as a competitive space, for example, and refuse, my first dot point, to accept that widening participation in academic publishing is a reduction in quality. And that has been one of the most personally, professionally nourishing and satisfying projects I think I've done for a long time. And to finish up with, this is just a call to action and a challenge to consider, what can you and what will you refuse? And that's me for today.
So Jo might join the conversation.
She
wants to turn her camera on.
Yep, we can.
Thank you so much, Sarah.
No worries.
I'm just
Can
getting
unslide my slide.
getting my
cool.
annoying
Thank you.
camera
Yay.
ready. Hi.
Hi.
Amazing. Jeez.
Cool.
Incredible. I've been taking notes and kind of yeah, really nodding my head furiously over here, and that, you know, got me thinking about all the different kind of ways our work is being woven together in the last few years. So thank you very much. Does anyone want to ask Sarah or discuss anything before I kind of start rambling?
We can riff off your rambles.
Just riff.
Riffing out a rambling.
Feminist theory. I love what you said about, you know, we're going to refuse to not like this exclusive elitist kind of old school academic culture that is kind of perpetuating and enabling all those, you know, the white supremacy, the colonization, colonialism, colonialist thinking, and the toxic male kind of privilege that is still kind of rampant in academia as well. Yeah, if anyone has any issues with my camera, sorry to speak about that. I've got to just, if it's causing any issues for you, just let me know and I'll turn it off because it's not the best camera. But
yeah, I agree. You know, Jo, it's just important to think that through. And you know, Laura Chernovitz and I are doing that JIME project. That was two women at a, you know, sort of mid to late career who just went, stuff it, we'll make what we want. We're going to, you know, do a special edition. And I'm seeing some really cool special edition projects out there.
The recent one from JIME was learning from lockdown. That was amazing.
Yeah, that's right. But if everyone who, you know, if just every couple of years people with the will and skills wanted to do a special edition and do that kind of level of mentoring to support ECR, Global South, peripheral within your own region, people's views of the topic, then, you know, bit by bit, there's just, you know, that makes a difference. That provides an outlet to build marginalised academics' careers up. You just have to make it so. I don't believe that we're not powerless in this system as well. So yeah.
Reminds me of the conversations that I've been having with class in the class the last 2 weeks. And I mentioned one of them in my presentation OER 21 last week. And I had another amazing experience just this morning. And it speaks exactly to that. I will refuse to make this an elitist thing. I will refuse to obstruct students' access into understanding how they can relate to the knowledge that it's my duty to share access to. So last week I had a student whose similarity report got flagged on their submission, and they stopped me a couple of times as the assignments were starting to come in. And they've been coming to class and engaging and having a lot to say about the points that we cover in the cultural studies unit that we teach. And it's a core foundational style kind of unit for a lot of us, but I was aware that the student wasn't really comfortable with the citation and the referencing conventions that we teach. And it's the first year unit, so of course we're still teaching it, and I don't expect perfection, but trying to translate what that means to the student ended up being, it's like, well, it's kind of like acknowledging or respecting your elders. It's like people who have done the work before us, we can use that in the academic center to our situation to kind of inform what we have to say and help form more informed opinions rather than just riffing on a social media kind of vibe, which we get a lot of from students in the moment, and especially in the last year with all the culturally significant events that have been going on. There's a lot of students sharing their reactions to the things, but we're trying to encourage them to gather information from a number of credible sources that will inform their opinions that they can then take into a professional context or develop in an academic sense. And so trying to translate these skills, and it was really wonderful conversation because both students in the last 2 weeks have had a presence in the classroom that if I was really uptight or if I was still of that kind of old school, I'm just going to lecture at you for 3 hours and, no questions allowed type thing, which I can't believe people still do, but it exists according to my students. That, and of course, sorry, I'm just going to stumbled over that, but I just have a feeling that it was really meaningful to discuss that with a student to say, well, and he came to me today and he just said, thanks a lot for last week because now I understand it's just a skill you were teaching me. But because I was raised and my experiences in education as a young Aboriginal child who was relocated, and I was told that my behavior was inappropriate in the schools, that I've always been in. I thought that, there was this like exclusive kind of culture, and there is. I mean, education's been a tool of colonization for years. But this one
That's
student,
what I was thinking, Jo, being a person who previously supported the software that you're using, I find the language really harsh on those text matching scores, and there's not much help for interpretation. And there's also little ability. We have tried to go back to the company and say, look, this is not the language that we want to use for the students, so it's difficult.
It is. But I share that whole, I make everything really open and transparent for the students to say this is what we do. So, but here's some examples for you so that you know what a good critical reflection paragraph looks like, but just put this into your own words. And so it demystifies that for students who've never been exposed to that. And that's international students that are used to just writing exams all the time and not doing this Western enriched, kind of very privileged, centering the student type of learning that we take for granted, to be honest. So having this conversation today was really affirming because he felt like he had been made space for, and that his behavior wasn't inappropriate. He's just had to learn a certain kind of skill to succeed in this academic situation. So I was quite happy with that. So to speak to what Sarah said about the making theory look difficult. It's you know, I find that as a not you know, as a student who struggled in my early teens, as well as I'm sure a lot of people did. I'll just share my screen because that's what I spoke about in my contribution to the FemEdTech Quilt. So there it is, and I've
Yay,
at this
penguins!
at this huge at this huge distance that I kind of was like so amazingly kind of enraptured with FemEdTech and kind of the hosting and how it was this dispersed model of people kind of take turns. And I still have my badge that I brought back from Frances and I shared with Wendy.
Yeah.
So we got the Australian contingent got the badges from OER 19, and so
I still have
as I
mine.
went, yeah, it was so nice.
The back of
And
it fell off, but it's good.
yeah, mine too. Mine's sticking on my board in my classroom. But I think the main emphasis that I'm trying to make with all of these points that I'm speaking to today is that human element of connecting with someone and not making it such, I mean, there's nothing unrigorous about explaining things in a number of different ways. Isn't that what critical thinking and communication and interdisciplinary thinking is all about? And so, you know, the fact that, you know, choosing only one way of teaching and managing the learning in your institution is sticking with that 800-year-old idea of what education and academia is about. And I reckon that, you know, given the last couple of years, especially, would definitely do for more interrogation and renovation of how we engage with students, especially online, because they're starting to feel even more isolated, right? So that's what helped me kind of get back into this community, this material and digital participation at the same time really spoke to that access of feeling something in your hands, creating it with your own hands, and then putting it in a mail and posting it across the world, and then seeing it there with your little story that you shared about the significance of why you'd made um, that little contribution. And that was my, you know, FemEdTech fangirling, but it was also my GOGN fangirling. My GOGN fellowship stuff is there. And all three blogs are there if you are interested in having a look. But you know, the meaning for me to participate in higher education and keep taking up space. I mean, I have a very strong woman who is the dean of our college, who is my supervisor as well in my PhD, and in addition to two other very senior, wonderful Indigenous researchers who have shown me kind of, you know, ways that they navigate higher education. And interestingly, um, this bringing everyone along with you and including everyone and making sure everyone at the table speaks is an ethos that I'm, you know, again, I mean, what will I refuse? I will refuse to um, perpetuate those types of exclusive dynamics in my classroom, but also, you know, encourage like and expect people to participate and bring everyone along, and everyone kind of contribute something. um, you know, so when I had a student join my class today who was very vocal, and was talking along with the lecturer. Our lecturer that took the class today was stationed online and is still in the States due to COVID. And so he was lecturing. He's a wonderful lecturer, Isaac Akande. So we're doing this high flex kind of model in the teaching. And in the classroom, the student was kind of talking along, but they were resonating with what Isaac was talking about. And I will, you know, I refuse to let that make me uncomfortable because I'm so used to acting a certain way in a classroom. So I knew that the student was chiming in with what they were thinking, and I knew the student was resonating with what was going on. They were just internalizing the learning in a vocal way. So I found that to be a really interesting a kind of a link into also um, how to include people and to keep, you know, people contributing and however they want. That was the positioning for my fellowship. So again, with my fangirling for GOGN, I mean, I can't say enough about that network. At this huge distance here in Australia, we are having our own little scene over here, but again, plugging into the bigger network around the world. Wendy's a champion at it, so is Sarah and Hank. Kate, I see a lot too. Colin. This is a really amazing network at reaching out. But I think, you know, making and taking up digital space and territory from this perspective of the world, you know, helps kind of contribute again and participate. And just, you know, just take a space at the table, not lean in, because we've got our own space that we've got. But I mean, we've got a very particular experience down in Australia. Thank you, Lisa. See you next time. But yeah, these are my 3 blogs that were talking about my fellowship. And because I teach in cultural studies, I've used the student input, and we've renovated this curriculum. That's beautiful. It's what I see on my way to and from work every day, just to rub it in. But yeah, so these three blogs talk about, you know, the existence of cultural capabilities in our cultural studies, how we use open practices in the unit, and how we've renovated it, but also how this new national priorities funding industry linkage fund framework is affecting higher education and the humanities in Australian higher education specifically. I know it's kind of a global phenomenon that's happening, but you know, our humanities degrees have doubled in price. And so what's really ironic is that in the humanities, we talk about critical thinking and critical engagement in ideas and nuance and complexity, but also, you know, communications and Indigenous studies, and we have this amazing wealth of knowledge here in Australia, and CDU here in the College of Indigenous Teachers that can contribute and participate in the narrative around what it means to contribute and work and collaborate. All these are things that the federal government is listing as job-ready skills. However, they've slashed the funding for humanities budgets, and now they're going to propose, you know, industry linkage as a measure for how universities might get funded in co-creating curricula. So I
such great points, Jo.
Oh,
There's
but
so
this is the thing.
many angles, you know,
Yeah,
angles to this, right from the government through to, like you said, our own spaces.
exactly. But I mean, we are already doing it. We're already doing it with our open practices, and if we use lots of beautiful, uh, you know, humanized technology in our delivery and our design, if we center the human connections that need to happen, like the one I've had this conversation with these students, if you take a minute to see what's on the other side of the screen, you can see that those workforce capabilities are already there. If we shut things down, and like I'm doing right now, ranting, sorry, but if, you know, that kind of one direction kind of telecast, or, you know, if we don't make space for those things, then how can we have different perspectives represented? How can we generate new ways and new power relationships within higher education, and renovate and give students what they need to face this world that we're in?
That's a great point. So let's wrap up there.
Yeah,
and please thank Jo in the chat, and any questions there. She'll be
Thank you, Hank.
here.